Hopefully everyone can see my slide deck now. So good morning, everyone. My name is Ade Adeola. As Greg said, I'm one of the chief technologists for the channel and switching portfolio in Aruba. And this morning I'll be going through the HPE Aruba CX campus switching portfolio and our unique selling points in the market, and why Aruba is who we are and where we stand in the market. So, as we all know, that recent trends of enterprise business adoption of digital transformation has placed demands on networks around areas of performance, security, operational efficiency, and so on. We know also that a modern network is what is needed to revitalize this, and this begins with switches, as they truly provide the absolute connectivity for network devices and IoT devices, and so on and so forth. It's of course no secret that ITs will continue to face more challenges if they try to enable these trends that I'm just showing here, and of course, if they try to enable newer technologies using their legacy networks, and if not properly accounted for, IoT can make businesses more vulnerable to things like cyber attacks, especially due to the inherent security and visibility limitations of such devices running on the network. Many IT teams continue to report that their facilities teams, for example, or even operational teams install these devices without IT's involvement or knowledge, because businesses or business units often expect to have those IoT devices, for example, operational within a day or two of making the requisition. Secondly, the use of siloed management tools will obviously continue to result in a lot of manual effort for network operators, which can lead to time delays, errors, and increase the risk of downtime. And those consequences actually negate some of the efficiency and agility of moving to the cloud in the first place. Many of our customers report that home employees or home office employees, that's people who work from home, continue to experience connectivity and other performance issues when accessing corporate apps and data, particularly over networks with varying conditions, which are likely outside of IT's direct line of sight or even control. Of course, if networks underperform, there's a direct impact on a user's digital experience, which has a cascading impact on business performance. And unfortunately, IT continues to spend a bulk of their time reacting to these issues manually, triaging and correlating information across various sources of the network to resolve the problem. So we've recognized these priorities and have done so since of Aruba. And I've continued to refine and enhance our zero trust security solutions to provide what we in Aruba are calling security first AI powered networking. So our security first AI powered networking is underpinned by what we call the Aruba HPE Aruba Networking Edge Services Platform, ESP platform. And each of these ESP platform for us in Aruba is what we use in actually designing solutions and offering options to our customers. It goes everything in ESP platform for Aruba is underpinned by our central cloud management, which covers everything, and it starts with the connect part of the ESP portfolio. So the connect part is the onboarding or user interface part of, or rather the part where people actually connect to the network, whether it be wirelessly, wired. We also have private 5G part of the business. Whatever it is that is connecting to a network, as far as Aruba is concerned, falls within the connect part of the portfolio. Of course, you would get several parts of our portfolio falling into several parts of the ESP platform in Aruba. And of course, the next layer of this is our Protect, which has things like our NAC solution, which is things like ClearPass or CloudDot for the central cloud NAC solution for those who prefer to go down that route. And of course, it allows us to also do other things like ZTNA and SASE solutions as well. And then of course we've got the automation, which is where the AI ops and troubleshooting capability of Aruba solution comes into play. Areas, things like onboarding, provisioning, and things like that happens within the automate part of the ESP portfolio. And then finally, we also realize in Aruba that it's not always a one size fits all where every customer has to go cloud. We know that there are so many other options that customers will prefer to have based on their business needs. And because of that, we are always willing to adapt. And one of these is, for example, for customers who do not want central cloud management, for example, we've got the central on-prem as an option for those kind of customers. And of course, also for customers who probably want to move away from the capex option where they sort of purchase all this hardware and kits and from day one, and probably want to sort of move their costs into an opex scenario. We've got the HP Financial Services option as well. So we're able to adapt. Basically, what I'm trying to say here, before I dive into the detail of our switching portfolio, actually, is that it doesn't matter what area you're playing within networking, Aruba has got something to cover this area. Okay, so here in Aruba, for many years now, we have been the number 2 in market share with over 1 billion ports of switches shipped in the industry. We've always been number 2 in networking for many years. But also, you might know this or you may not know that for the last 18 years, we have always been positioned as a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, and this has always continued. But importantly, this is where the conversation around the CX portfolio starts to get into the detail. Some of you may know the old Gen 6, Gen 5, and so on of Aruba A6, which we used to have in the what used to be called the Provision or Procurve switches, which is now Aruba OS switching. What we did with the CX portfolio was we decided that we've got 2 options. One option is we could build on the existing ASIC and continue to try and make it work and retrospectively fit in some of these AI powered solutions or next generations networking, as they call it. But that will limit us because of the capabilities of those ASICs. So we decided that option 2 was better, which is basically we release a new ASIC which is designed specifically for this purpose. And because we've done that, it allowed us to build the CX portfolio from the ground up. And we've got experience, we've got years of experience in this, over 30 years of experience building this, and now being able to go to Gen 7 ASICs and build from the ground up for our campus switching portfolio is one of the value that we added in Aruba. And also, I've already mentioned the HPS financial services option that we bring, and of course our global coverage with Green Lake for Aruba option as well. One of the things that Gartner said many years ago is that for a solution to be referred to as cloud native, which is what CX switching is, it has to be, it has to follow these 4 key principles in terms of resiliency, programmability, elasticity, and modularity. And the CX portfolio, switching portfolio, fits all of these scenarios. Actually, is built around these 4 principles. So briefly, this is what the CX portfolio looks like. We've got products from the 4000 series access entry level, if you look at the bottom left of your screen, and moving to the top right hand corner from campus switching to data center. Some of the data center switches fall in both categories where they're used as campus aggregation or core switches and so on and so forth, depending on the customer's need. But one of the key things that we did in Aruba as part of building this next generation AI powered networking in CX was we decided to use an option where we would have common operating system from the edge to the data center. Personally, we believe that operationally this makes the life of our customers easier, because whether you're configuring a top of rack switch in the data center, you're configuring a campus switch, an aggregation switch, or an edge switch, the look, the feel, the CLI, the experience is the same. And also you don't need multiple skills, having to learn a separate operating system for maybe your data center or your aggregation, your core, and having to learn a separate operating system and CLI and experience on the edge. So it's just one consistency from edge to data center, from edge to core to data center, basically. And the first switch I would just probably mention on this slide is the CX 4100. These are ruggedized um, um, switch, which can be used in very harsh and extreme environments, maybe warehouses where the temperature gets really high or very hot, or in environments where the temperature gets really low. The 4100 is a very, very useful switch. I've seen some colleges or even universities or schools use it in extreme remote buildings where they just need a switch, but they need that switch to be able to withstand certain temperatures or harsh environments, and that's where the 4100 fits in. Now, the next switch I'll talk about briefly is the 6000 series. Now, the 6000 and the 6100 switch. So the 6000 switch and the 6100 switch are layer 2 entry level Aruba CX switches. Now, the difference between the 6000 and the 6100 is that the 6000 has 1 gig uplinks, whereas the 6100 has 10 gig uplinks. So that's the key difference. So most of the 6100 switches would have options for 10 gig uplinks, whereas the 6000 switches will have option for just 1 gig, but they're both layer 2 entry level switches. You're also hearing this maybe from me first. One of the things that feedback we've heard from our customers is it will be good because they are non-stackable switches, the 6000 and the 6100. It would be nice to have an entry level layer 2 switch that has stacking capabilities. So the 6100 and the 6000 never used to have stacking capabilities, but we are working on it now. There's a plan to have 6100 switches with stacking capabilities of up to 4 or 5 switches in a stack. So that's one of the things, because we're able to innovate because it's our own ASIC, we're able to make these changes if we want to and when we want to, and that's where the direction is going. It's not out yet, but you're hearing it from me first. Secondly is the 6200. So that's a light layer 3 switch, stackable, runs VSF, which is virtual switching framework for stacking with a front plane stacking capability, which virtualizes the switch up to 8 or 10, depending on the switch family. And then, of course, you've got the 5420, which is our entry level, budget level type chassis switch. Of course, it's a chassis switch just like the 6400, but it has limited scalability just to allow for customers who don't need all the features, all the scale, and all the additional value that you get in the 6400, but they just want a core switch, either to be an edge switch, which is a chassis switch, or even aggregation or data, or core, and that's where the 5420 falls in. And the 6300 is a full layer 3 switch with all the most of the features that you get, for example, on the 6400, but at, of course, a reduced scale. The 6400 comes in 2 variants. You've got the 5 slots, you've got the 10 slot, and it's a chassis switch with multiple line cards and modules that can go into that chassis. And then you start to get to the 8100, which it could be maybe an aggregation switch for some customers, could be a core switch for some customers, could be a top of rack switch for some customers, but it's a low cost top of rack switch with limited scalability, not as scalable as the likes of 8325 or the 8360 that you can find here. And then, of course, you've got the big beast, which is the big chassis 8400. It's a core switch, data center switch if you need extreme, if you need higher maybe ports requirement, higher bandwidth ports, or even higher scale, you get that. And then we have the 9300 series, which has 400 gig uplinks, and then 32 ports of 400 gig option as well in that family. And then you've got the CX10K, which is our switch with firewall capabilities built in. But I'll talk about that one separately later, just for information. So the next thing is, I presume a lot of people would ask me, okay, you've just showed us that you've got all these switches, but what actually separates Aruba? What are you doing differently? Why should I consider Aruba? What value does Aruba bring to my business? Or otherwise, you're just showing me speeds and feeds. It's a switch is a switch. Okay, maybe multiple vendors, I've got various switches. So I've put this slide together. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. It's one of the most important slides in my presentation today, because actually what I'm trying to do here is just to summarize some of the value add that Aruba switching portfolio, the CX switching portfolio, brings to your environment. I've talked about the first one earlier, which is the fact that we wanted simplicity from access to data center. We wanted the same look, feel operationally, to help the operational team to limit the amount of CLIs that they would need to manage or support. They would have just that experience. If you know a CX switch, you can configure a CX switch, either it's an edge, a campus, depending on your skill, or a data center switch. The other thing is the VSX Live upgrade capability, where you've got, I would explain slightly, I've got a slide that explains what the difference between VSF and VSX, and what VSX is and what value it brings. But VSX Live upgrade is the ability to do live upgrade service, software upgrades on a live network, in a controlled manner, without bringing down your network, especially now that businesses need constant, or 24/7, or network availability. But also, one of the key things that we also bring is the always on PoE. So always on PoE is basically, in the past, some years back, if you, for example, soft power cycle, if you issue a reload command on a switch, and you power cycle the switch, and the switch is going back up, usually what happens is the switch stops delivering PoE to all the connected devices, and you start to get your IP phones, all of them, losing PoE, having to restart as well. Your access points having to restart as well. Your IP CCTV cameras and all the connected devices losing PoE connectivity. With always on PoE, which is something which we actually started as Aruba. A few other vendors are starting to copy it now. So with always on PoE, if you reload, or maybe you're doing an upgrade and you restart the switch, it still continues to deliver PoE to those connected devices. Of course, realistically, it means that, of course, traffic will not, when the switch is spin power cycles, is not pushing traffic. But what it means is that you don't need to go through those devices having to lose power and then doing a full restart or a reboot when the switch comes back online. So it's to minimize and reduce downtime when this sort of restarts are being done on the network. We've also got network analytics engine, which is something that we've built into the switch. I talked about having a cloud native architecture. So the CX portfolio is actually cloud native architecture, whereby we've done a few things. We've included things like we've got the state databases, which is something that we've built into the CX portfolio, and we've got the CX network analytics engine. It's like having a network engineer actually sat within your switch and constantly looking at what's going on and giving you feedback or information, or advising you on certain things that you should do or consider. One of it is, for example, if you're having maybe a DDoS attack, the switch can notice that actually there's been lots of maybe requests or connections or something being requested up, from this interface. I think you're having a DDoS attack, and it would feed that back to the administrator to say, do you want me to block this port? The administrator can then confirm whether they want to block the port, or alternatively, what you could also do is to say, well, if you get this multiple kind of requests or connections coming into this port, it's going to be probably a DDoS attack happening. I want you to block any of the ports, any ports that gives you this reaction, and then notify me as the network administrator to take subsequent action. You can go either way, basically, but it's just having that. Now, a lot of the other vendors that wanted to do this are now doing it off the box. So because we had Gen 7 ASIC, we built a new ASIC specifically for CX. We're able to actually build this into the switch. A lot of vendors have thought, maybe an external off the box solution that actually constantly probes the box and gets this information and then relays it back to the administrators. We have it built into the network analytics engine. And then in the middle here, you've got what we call Aruba dynamic segmentation. We also call it colorless port. Some of our customers call it one port fits all. This works in conjunction with our NAC solution, ClearPass in the backend, or CloudAuth if you're using Central CloudAuth. What it does is it uses certain information to make a decision on what to do with any connection happening on any of your switch ports. An example could be in the past, if you want to plug in say a printer to a network, you would have to configure, you go to somebody, you have to tell networking team, they have to configure the individual ports and then enable it, and enable it for that printer to be connected, and then you have to connect the printer. Occasionally you get people connecting the printer to the wrong port within the LAN, and then you say, oh, I configured the wrong port, it's not the same port you've plugged the printer into, sorry, I have to configure the right port now. But with dynamic segmentation, what you do is it helps you configure all your ports the same. So you just you do it once, you configure all the ports the same, enabling all this Aruba colorless port functionality on the ports. Operationally, what that does is it helps to minimize all your adds, moves, and changes, regularly having to configure individual ports. But what it does is if somebody just plugs in, say, for example, you go and then plug in this hypothetical scenario of a printer, it would the network with the switch will be able to talk to CloudAuth or ClearPass, and then based on the policy defined, will place that device in the VLAN, that it needs to be for printing, for example. And the same goes for every other device that you may want to configure. And you may have onboarding from a certain device. Maybe somebody's laptop is connecting through the access point, and the person needs access to maybe Office 365, but doesn't need access to some other things in finance or maybe HR or things like that. It will place them in the correct VLAN. But all you just need to do is you've built the configuration, you've set it up. This is another value that we bring with CX. And then, of course, finally on this slide, we've got one of the things that Aruba decided to do was that we didn't want switch software licensing skills or subscription costs on our switches. We thought, okay, if you need full layer 3, advanced layer 3 features, you need whatever it is, or maybe even you just need a layer 2 switch. What you buy is what you get. Because back to helping the operational team again, a repeating theme in my conversation is that let's even talk about the cost of the licensing, but even the fact that you have to take note and know which devices have got which licensing, and then maybe sometimes some people will keep spreadsheets and say we've got this switch in that place that needs a full layer 3 IP LAN or whatever license, and that one needs we don't need full layer 3 on the other one, and they have to start keeping record of all of this. You don't need to do that. If you get, say, for example, one of our advanced layer 3 switches today, you may not need that feature. You may not configure it day one. Whenever the feature becomes required within your environment, you just go to the switch and you configure it. You've bought your switch, it's your switch. You don't need to come back to us to tell us I want advanced layer 3 feature on that switch. You just go and configure it. It also means that for that family of switch, if we introduce certain new features, for example, maybe when we introduce MPLS to some switch families, we just release a new software code version for that switch family that allows you to do MPLS. You download it for free, you use it on that switch family, and that's it. You don't need to pay pay us anything. Earlier I mentioned the fact that we might be bringing, for example, stacking into 6100 switches. It allows us to do this as well, because when that happens, we'll bring out a new code that allows stacking on the CX6100, and you just install it, and there you go, you're able to stack your switches. And those are the value that we bring in Aruba. We're not going to say, well, because we're not enabling stacking on these switches, we're going to charge you, it's a different, cost for downloading a switch code that allows you to stack that switch. No, we won't do that. So that's those are value that we bring. We think about the customers, operational teams, management of the network, and making your life easier. We think about cost for you. We think about preventing you from doing several hard moves and changes and things like that. So earlier I mentioned that VSF and VSX, and I thought it's important actually for me to share what VSF is and what VSX is, because of course some people might not know. So VSF is our virtual switching framework. It's a switch stacking of switch virtualization actually technique. For those who know other vendors similar to the likes of Cisco's VSS, or those who know the HPE Comware series who remember IRF, it's the kind of scenario you could stack switches. You use 10 gig, 40 gig, 100 gig interfaces, or 400 gig interfaces, and you use them to stack the switch. Now, VSF uses is a single control plane, so things like management, control, routing, and Ethernet links are all shared within it. So they maintain, routing table, same routing table, and things like that. And that's what VSF is. The second stacking technology that we have in Aruba is called VSX, which is virtual switching extension. This is for people also, basically the difference between VSF and VSX is VSX, unlike VSF, is a distributed control plane. So things at layer 2 is one single switch. At layer 3, there are two separate switches. So things like routing, they maintain their routing tables. They continue to sync it if you want. The control and management you have independently on each switch forming VSX. Now, unlike VSF that can go up to 8 or 10 switches depending on the family, VSX is limited to 2 switches, similar to what some vendors have, like VPC, MC lag, or MLAG, and so on and so forth. So that's the difference. The other question I thought I should answer is, then I brought back the previous slide, is where would I use VSF and where would I use VSX? So switch families that I've got here, 54, 20, 64 and above, all use VSX, 2 switches in a VSX pair, distributed control plane. And those are the switches that we've got that run VSX. So it's important to note that. So these switches I've got there in the dotted line are all the ones that use VSX. And then, of course, the 62 and 6300 are the ones that use VSF. The 6000 and the 6100 currently don't stack, so there's no need. But when the 6100 stacks, it will be VSF. So just take note of that. That's important to note, really. Okay, so the other thing I mentioned earlier, I talked about VSX live upgrades, which is one of the things that we are able to do with VSX, having VSX. Basically, it's something we've done from day one on Aruba CX switches that run VSX, enabling you to have a continuous operational environment. If you decide, for example, you want to do an upgrade on the switch. So if you do want to do a switch upgrade in these scenarios I've got here, you've got 2 switches, switch A and switch B in a VSX pair. If you initiate the VSX live upgrade process, basically what happens is it starts to move traffic from switch A to switch B, shutting down all the uplinks and downlink ports of switch A. Once there are no packets or traffic going through switch A, it then starts the upgrade process. And then when you've completed the upgrade process on switch A, it checks that the switch is settled and everything is fine. Then it reverses the process. It starts to move traffic from switch B to switch A. At this point in VSX mode, notice that they will both be running at 2 different software codes, but this is possible, yes, in a VSX live upgrade scenario. It starts to move the traffic from switch B to switch A, and once that's done, switch B doesn't have any packets or traffic going through it. It shuts down all the uplink downlink ports and then starts the process again. And once that's done, it checks that the switch is settled, and then they become a pair again. And that's one of the things that we're able to do with having VSX capability. It's called VSX Live Upgrades ISSU, but it's an advanced ISSU functionality as well. So with CX, we create business continuity across network through software and hardware. Basically, critical non-stop availability during upgrade is made possible with VSX Live Upgrade, for example. With VSX, also always on PoE for continuous power to devices is one of, just to reiterate what I've said before. Of course, depending on the switch family, you get power redundant fans, redundant power supplies in some of the switch family. It enables you to either do stacking or clustering, or as I called it, maybe VSX or VSF. You can do for example, you can do them in 2 different racks. You can do them in 2 different buildings. You can do them, at some distance if you have that fiber connecting between them with long range transceivers, obviously. And of course, importantly, we also have what we call NetEdit. NetEdit is our multi-editor. It's called in Central. It allows you to maybe automate and sort of validate your configs before rolling them out on our switches. And if you've got less than 20 switches, NetEdit is free. Once the scale starts to get bigger, you then need to get licenses to cover higher number of switches. But if you've got 20 and below, NetEdit is free. So briefly before I finish, I was going to talk. I sort of kept the CX10K to a side, partly because it's something that actually differentiates and distinguishes us. So some years ago, Aruba invested in a business called Pensando. Pensando is an Italian word, I think, for thinking or innovation, something like that. And the business, usually they were making what they call DPU cards, line cards that could fit in servers with firewall functionality to actually inspect traffic in and out from those servers. Then it was decided actually we can put this on a switch. So they put it on an on an Aruba switch, and that was the birth of the CX10K. With basically you've got a switch with firewall capability put into that switch, which means at just a subminimal increase in cost of a standard top of rack switch, for example, a standard switch, you've got firewall capability built into the switch itself. And this switch supports things like DDoS, prevention, telemetry, encryption as well, NATing, server load balancing is something that we will be releasing very soon. Pensando as a business have now been acquired by AMD, the chipset manufacturer. But because we had the first relationship with them, we brought this in. And I recall some of our competitors saying at the time, why would somebody need a firewall and a switch? You buy a firewall separately. We would never go down that route. That same vendor that said they would never go down that route a couple of months ago, after we've had this for 2 years, I've now gone ahead and had a relationship with AMDs, and I've now released 2 switch families with those DPU chipsets in it. But because we started this, we had that vision. We've got a lot more advancement into our solution than they do today. So it's one example where Aruba sets the pace, basically. And what do you get from it? Why do we have it? So this is an example. We know that 80% of traffic in a data center, for example, is east-west traffic. And a lot of customers that want to, not perimeter firewall now, that want to secure east-west traffic or want to do traffic inspection for east-west, usually we go and get a third-party firewall and put it in a separate rack. What does this bring? It means that you're not making efficient use of your bandwidth because you're having to send traffic maybe between your spine leaf and then, of course, to the external firewall to be inspected and back. So that's an inefficient use of your bandwidth. And then, of course, it may cause congestion and the latency it brings as well is an issue. And that's not even talking about the cost of licensing and, of course, the external firewall license. So that is the issue that we try to fix with the CX10K. This is what you get with the CX10K, for example. If you've got top of rack switch, that's a very, very small difference in price to a standard top of rack. If you have the CX10K on top of rack, you can do the traffic inspection for intra-rack traffic and inter-rack traffic without having to make an inefficient use of spine-leaf bandwidth, for example. And then of course you're saving a lot of money compared to getting, say, for example, 2 third-party firewalls, and that's one of the key things. One of the things that also you get from the CX10K is improved visibility with integrated telemetry built into that switch as well. So before I go, I've got 2 more slides, and this one I thought it would be good to share. You can see where we stand in terms of common vulnerability and enumeration CVEs. We're one of, we've got very low CVE on the CX portfolio. And the question I always ask my customer is, doesn't your data deserve better? When you say, if you focused on, we in Aruba, we're focused on quality from development to development. We push upstream fixing at source, basically. Because of that, we're able to limit the amount of CVEs that we get on our switching portfolio. And then finally, and importantly, our switches come with limited lifetime warranty, which means 5 years post end of sale. So if you announce an end of sale of a switch, for example, today, up to 5 years after that end of sale is announced, you still get your 5 years hardware warranty on an Aruba switch. Also important to mention, actually, I should have mentioned it earlier, is that if you have Aruba Central, you automatically get 24/7 software support included in your switching portfolio. So if you're managing your switch on Central and you've got Aruba Central license, you get 24/7 software support included as part of your purchase of a license for that switch within Central. So it's one of the things, that values that we try to bring in Aruba: make your life easier, save you money, make it easier operationally to manage your network, make it easier for you to plan in terms of cost for your network. So I think at this point I'm going to end and hand over to the guys to talk individually.
Thanks, Ade, for that. Much appreciated. Let me just bring up my slides. So as Greg alluded to, obviously we're conscious of time, and obviously I appreciate you've all got busy days. So myself and Wood, I want to do an overview on how you would scale and spec switches for your current network, obviously for today or tomorrow moving forward. So I guess without further ado, I'll go straight into it. So on the previous webinars that we've done, we've obviously gone through switching. Sorry, we're doing switching. We've gone through central, wireless. So when you're looking at switching, you need to consider your wireless design as well. So if you're going for a wireless first approach, yes, you may have more devices connected to a higher density AP. That higher density AP may require more ports. So you may be reducing your rack in the sense of a wireless first approach, but you may need more requirements in your switching to drive that forward. So as it says here, prioritizing your wireless first design, but assist with the wired client needs. So considering the Wi-Fi and the PoE is quite an important consideration. So from my perspective, when speaking to customers, you want to go wireless first, that's great. What are your plans for now and for the future? You do need to consider the multi-gig, the smart rate, the higher PoE capabilities within current hardware, but you must consider any potential requirement, not just say necessarily for today, but what the future is going to entail. So I guess, Will, with that in mind, if you wouldn't mind probably just giving a very quick overview of those considerations and why you must consider those in order to firstly consider the type and make and model of the switch that you're going for and what capabilities is required.
Sure. As modern APs have got faster and faster with the latest standards and have the capability now to push quite a lot of data, the wired side has kind of kept pace, and so we've got smart rate switches now, which other than the normal 1 gig port that you get these days. You've also got 2.5, 5, or even 10 gig. So you can, if you buy such a switch, you're obviously got capacity in hand, if you like, for that access point upgrade you may well do in the coming sort of months or years. The other way of looking at that also is that modern APs have more than one port, so that you can combine traditional 1 gig LAN ports to get more throughput that way. So there is some flexibility there.
Perfect. Thanks, Will. And then I guess, as Ade alluded to earlier on, that depending on the backbone of your network, the capabilities within those switches also need to be considered. As you alluded to, that the 6100s aren't as, or the 6000s aren't as capable as a 6263. So you do need to consider what your growth plans would look like within your current design, or where you may be going in the next 2 or 3 years, because there will be a cost implication. But if you are going to go down the higher throughput capabilities from a backbone perspective, the investment either now or in the future for a higher capacity switch would only benefit you, rather than replacing those switches, or for a lower density or low capable switch now, knowing that you've got to replace it with your future growth and plans. So you should just need to, as it says here, align any future backbone capabilities with the growth and traffic demands. So there will be requirements that you just need to consider. And moving through the design phase, really for us, it's obviously the planning piece. So there are going to be limitations on what is required within certain capabilities of those switches, but there are other options that sit outside of stacking switches. So I guess with that in mind, Will, would you just mind giving us a overview of the increased resiliency and scalability within options that can provide different capabilities with different variants of switches that have different options for stacking or other options there may be?
Yeah, one of my favorite things, I guess, is being able to stack switches, because that instantly makes life easier from a resilience perspective, because you've effectively got one logical switch with a lot of ports. From a management point of view, it's easier to manage and oversee. And the good thing about stack is that it's highly resilient, especially if you stack it in a ring. Rather than a string, if you follow what I mean. So if you stack in a ring, then you've got that resilience, because one switch can always see its neighbor, so to speak. So that's that gives you that resilience that you're looking for, and also the multi-port connectivity. So you end up with the ability to support a lot of connections concurrently.
Perfect. And I guess that's a great segue into the next question, where if we're going to enhance, or if we have resiliency, how do we enhance resiliency? And I guess there is a nice little topic that Will's going to discuss now, is how can you support the growth and resiliency within your design, not just with, do you have enough wireless to support your campus, your environment? If you have a switch failure, are you losing the complete wireless network within that area? But there are functionalities and things to consider. So, Will, you mentioned previously to me that there are some key elements within resiliency, enhancing that resiliency, that may benefit from a centralized deployment across distribution across different switches and access points.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things today, I guess that's in sharp focus, is that most organizations don't really have enough people supporting the network. So it's a small team that are forever busy, right? Because network usage increases, the number of devices increases, but the headcount to actually oversee that usually doesn't. So it's kind of a do more with less scenario. So that's where smart tools really come in, and a tool such as Aruba Central is one such tool that can really help in your day-to-day existence, in managing the network and, keeping tabs on what's going on there. So, there's too much to go into now. It's massive. HPE Aruba are investing probably embarrassing sums of money into Central to actually enhance it and add more features pretty much on a weekly basis. So one of the things it will do, just as an example, so say you've got a stack of switches and you've got your access points on your building floors connected to those switches. Central will actually look at how your APs are connected to those switches, and it'll make suggestions. So it'll say, you've kind of got most of your APs on switch 2 and 3 in the stack. Why not move these switches from switch 3 to move these APs from switch 3 to switch 4? And it'll actually suggest which ports you might want to move. And it's things like that really that really help in the day-to-day task of keeping the network running.
Perfect. Thanks, Will. Obviously, I'm conscious of time, so obviously with the last three pieces, we won't obviously cut through them. But so, Will, if you wouldn't mind, around traffic segmentation, I appreciate that is a large topic in itself, and I know that Ade has covered some of this in the presentation. But would you just give us, I guess, your thoughts on that traffic segmentation piece, please?
Yeah, it's in the beginning, I suppose you got dynamic VLAN assignment. So depending on how your user stroke device was authenticated, they get allocated to a VLAN. That's been around for years, and people have used that, in their day-to-day for a long time, and it works really well. However, the world has moved on now. So, I mean, Ade touched on it earlier, the Aruba colorless ports idea, where all your ports are kind of generic in terms of configuration. And then when that user stroke device is authenticated onto the network, the device, if you like, that does that authentication says, okay, I recognize you, you're this class of device, this class of user, I'm going to put you on this VLAN, and I'm going to push that config to the switch port that you're connected to live on the fly, so to speak. And that is, that's groundbreaking, really, and so simplifies the network connectivity in the first place. Because when you roll out a switch, it has a generic config. They're all pretty much all the same in terms of access switches, and then the config is pushed on the fly, depending on what device stroke user is connected. Really, really cool.
Thank you. So I guess that underpins most of what we're talking about is Central, which comes in, and there's a lot of topics around different switch models have different licenses within Central, which basically supports any growth plans. If you're looking to monitor the usage of the network, then Central will underpin what you're trying to do. So it will help you with looking at where bottlenecks are within your current network. And if there are bottlenecks, then Central will give you natural language and to understand where those issues are. So leveraging Central will only provide you more clarity and to support you and your team to make changes within your network, to plan for future capacity if you do see any bottlenecks coming, and identifying traffic trends that you may need to consider. In either way, does that mean that you need more APs or change the type of AP? All this will be supported via Central, not just under the switching element, but if you were to look at the wireless as well. And then really to go to the last piece around power and network resiliency, you do need to consider what your network is going to do now and for the future, which has always been an undertone in the building block. So redundancy is quite an important thing. Not necessarily do you have enough switches, do you have enough switches in the stack, do you have enough power from a redundant power supply, or do you have UPSs to support your network? If there are going to be any failures, you want to mitigate any potential failings that would either be detrimental to losing a whole cab. And if you had a switch, do you lose a switch, and then do you have a backup supply to run that, and then be alerted via Central to move forward and support the uptime of the network with complete resiliency, which obviously is a good thing. So you just need to consider some of those things. So PoE resiliency and planning. What happens if there's a switch failure? Do you have a spare switch if that is complete hardware failure, or do you have a power supply? And obviously, are all your critical paths protected? I.e., do you have UPSs to support your network? And I appreciate, we're running out of time, and if there are any questions, we would obviously go into the forum and have a chat. So I just have one last slide, and it really is to summarize our last 4 webinars from a complete picture perspective. And it's more of just a takeaway for you to go away, have a thought, have a think. And if there are any questions and considerations in your future plans, then please come and speak to your account managers or KHIPU, and we'll be able to help you in that design. So I guess I'll read through it anyway. So it's laying the foundations for scalable, intelligent connectivity. As you evaluate your future of your network infrastructure, it's essential to align technology choices with both current operational demands and future scalability. Carefully consider and make models of access points to ensure that you support your wireless strategy, especially if it's a wireless first approach, is under consideration. Defining your desired backbone speeds, both now and with growth in mind, will be a critical supporting high performance connectivity. To simplify network oversight and drive operational efficiency, adopting centralized management through a single pane of glass is key. Finally, for secure and granular access control, ClearPass offers a robust foundation to enforce policies, enhance visibility, and maintain compliance across your user devices. That summarizes what Aruba can offer based on our webinars that we've carried out over the last 4 sessions. So if they need any more clarity or any further conversations, please, like I said, do not hesitate to reach out to us or your account managers, and we'll help you support you in whatever journey you may be on. So thank you for your time.